Why Friendship, written by Thelonious Howe. I want a pet. This statement caught PB-047 off guard. Tani had never been the most forward-thinking or logical person, but she certainly wasn't stupid. What she had just said, however, was profoundly, outrageously, objectively stupid. Friend Tully, PB-047, knew that she hated being called that, but the circumstances demanded that a reality check may be necessary. That is an exclusion zone apex hunter-killer. Physical interaction would be ill-advised. Tully scoffed. Sheesh, Peeps. Where's your sense of adventure? PB-047 cringed at the name, but they had called Tully something she didn't care for, so she had called them something they didn't care for. Fair was fair. This adventure you wish to partake in is less gallivanting exploits and more hyperlane straight to self-termination, PBV-047 chided. Tully, however, remained unfazed. Yeah, but just look at it. It's so adorable. PB-047's relays clicked nervously. Friend, Tully, I'm going to go pet it. Their companion quickly interrupted. And with that, she was off, not letting her companion offer a rebuttal. PB-047 watched as she hooked a hard right around the clearing, keeping herself almost hidden in the underbrush. Tully stepped lightly, making sure she was unnoticed right up until she had reached the point that was the closest to the hunter-killer that she could manage. It would be an open ground from here on out, and PB-047 was worried for their friend. She had two options. One was to try and sneak up on the thing, which would likely result in grievous bodily harm, trying to get the drop on an apex killing machine, and two was to make some form of ruckus to alert it to her presence, and would likely result in grievous bodily harm, offering the chance to pounce on its prey from a distance. Tully went with the slightly less moronic idea of apprising this thing of her presence by stepping loudly on a stick as she entered the clearing, probably deciding that should the worst outcome occur, the space between them would offer a facade of a slight cushion of safety. The hunter-killer looked up, its predator eyes searching for the source of the disturbance, and landed squarely on Tully. It stared at her for a moment before it gave a brief bow of its head. It wanted to let her know that it knew that she was there. PB-047 screamed internally as Tully took this as an invitation to get closer. She took a slow, measured steps towards the hunter-killer. "Ooh, who's a handsome hunter?" she said softly. The hunter-killer's attention was once more captured, and his gaze cast back onto Tully. Huh. You're a handsome hunter. She was practically swooning over this murder machine. The hunter-killer blinked slowly at her. Okay, thank you. Today was chock full of surprises for PB-047. They hadn't done much research on the specimen that lay in front of them, but they had heard stories, and considering the information that had been passed along, they were surprised that it could formulate thoughts beyond maim, kill, burn, let alone deconstruct full sentences. Tully squealed, "You want a treat?" The apex hunter just continued to stare at her for a moment before making a strange motion with its arm and glancing down at its wrist. "Yeah, I could eat." Tully drew a sweet bar ration from her satchel. Her mid-wing claws certainly weren't the most dexterous of things, and if the hunter-killer saw her fumble, it may be inclined to attack, deeming her to be easy prey. This was a pivotal moment in the interaction, and if PB-047 had breath, they certainly would be holding it. PB-047 fully expected to see the thing pounce, to hear the snapping of bone and tearing of flesh, but none of that happened. The hunter-killer simply stood there, doing not much of anything. The only sound emanating from the clearing was the crinkling noise of the snack bar being opened rather poorly. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to get the wrapper open and slid down the bar. Tully slowly held out the sweet bar to the thing. Its arm reached for the treat, and PB-047 was sure that this time would be it. It was now well within grasping range of their friend. There was no way this wouldn't end poorly. Gentle, Tully prompted, and surprisingly, the hunter-killer seemed to respond to this. It slowed its arm down in what appeared to be an attempt to put her at ease, and delicately took the offered refreshment. PB-047 began to relax a little now. Maybe the hunter-killer was already satiated or worn out from a previous hunt. But at any rate, they'd elected to not attack their friend, and furthermore, Tully had expanded her arsenal of stupid ideas for the day, surely. But Tully had decided to show up with all chambers loaded. PB-047 nearly blew a circuit when she reached out her wing and began to gently tap the hunter-killer on the top of its head. "Head pats for friend-shaped friends," Tully cooed melodically. PB-047 began preparing the eulogy. The hunter-killer let out a strange snort, followed by a low, growling bark, which caused Tully to jump back and PB-047, despite the distance, to shudder with fear. "Sorry, I don't mean to startle you, that's just too good. We do the same thing, though I can't say that I've ever been on this end of it," the hunter-killer said through strange wheezing breaths. It then took a rather large bite of the snack. "Hey, this is pretty good. Thanks." It then offered out its other arm. "John, by the way." Tully stared at the offered appendage, and PB-047 could tell that something was brewing in whatever remained of her brain. "Please, no," they muttered to themselves. It seemed that their quiet plea fell on deaf ears as Tully reached out and clasped onto its wrist with both of her wings and began tugging in the direction of poor PB-047. "Come on," Tully asserted cheerfully. That was it. If it didn't kill Tully, PB-047 would. She had caused far too much distress to his systems today, just by being dumb. Even if it wasn't a bloodthirsty monster, even if its only directive wasn't to kill, she had just assaulted it. The thing would be downright negligent if it didn't defend itself. It should tear her to pieces for the transgression, and PB-047 would attest to that in court. But much like every other interaction between the two, this one also did not have the expected outcome. The hunter-killer just sighed and said, "All right, I guess we're doing this now." He trotted along quite dutifully behind her. Tully marched back to her companion with walking apocalypse firmly in tow. "See," she was beaming with pride. "See how friendly it is? Oh, Peebs, can we keep it?" End of story. Those Who Stand Between, written by Jack Frag. "Mamma, I don't want to go. It's boring. It's always the same story," little Goebel whined. Godel's mother stopped preening her head feathers and looked down at her young son. "It's always the same story because we can never forget it. Kapawpaw is very old, and soon another will take over the telling." She ruffled his young puff of feathers. "Maybe even you one day." Godel sighed. "Yes, Mama. Now go get ready. This is a special dark moon telling. Your cousin is being made a human tonight." Godel's eyes shifted to blue in delight. "Really?" He scampered off to re-straighten his feathers. Godel's mama, Tokel, kept an eye on the setting on the second sun. When the large red disk had finally fallen below the occluding mountain range, she opened the thick clay pot that contained her family's most prized possession. Only on dark moon tellings was it brought out, because only then were the strongest, quickest, smartest, and bravest of the youths inducted into the ranks of humans. It was the honor of her family to possess and care for the precious artifact. Once it was safely secured in its padded satchel, she called, "Godel, time to leave." Now that Godel had learned of his cousin's accomplishment, he was eager to go to the telling. Godel bounced all over the path with his friends while Tokel walked behind, visiting with the others of the village as they joined the procession to the bonfire. Tellings happened every 13 sunsets, but dark moon tellings only occurred every few seasons. It was not often that both suns would set at the same time as a dark moon. That was when the star demons had come, so it was an apt time to remember their defeat. When Tokel and Godel arrived at the bonfire, the flames were already strong and bright, and their reserved bench at the front was almost uncomfortably warm. She took her place with the artifact in her lap, and with an antsy Godel beside her. Soon enough, the entire village was seated and patiently waiting on Kapawpaw and the squad of humans. When the flames had died to bright coals, the stomping of marching feet signaled the start of the telling. All of the spectators stilled and waited with reverence while the ranks of humans filed in and surrounded the special chair of Kapawpaw the teller. They looked splendid in their armor made of bark. The bark was all painted white with a blue circle over their chests. Their head plumage was covered by helmets made from the thick skin of the Zak-Zak beast, and their faces were painted black as the night sky. In the firelight, their eyes glowed an ominous green. Shortly after, leaning heavily on his staff, Kaporpo walked in from the darkness and slowly took his chair. The eyes of the entire village followed his progress as he turned and sat. He looked over the coals to the eyes of his people that had no memory of the terrible days of his youth. He took a strong grip of his staff and stamped it into the ground twice. "Let us begin the telling," he cried out in a surprisingly strong voice. "The telling begins," the villagers spoke back in unison. Kaporpo lowered his staff and began. "For as long as the people have walked this world, we have hidden in our hearts when the skies flashed and the air shook. We were wise to fear, for those with signs of battle beyond our imagining, until why we may never know. One day the battle spelled to us. The dark moon sky split open, and the demons fell from the stars into our forests and fields. We were simple people then, and nothing stood between the star demons and their spears that threw fire and lightning like our bows do arrows. So many, many people died that night, and more the days and nights after that. We died until the humans looked down from their mountains and saw our plight. Then they flew down in their huts made of stuff that we have no name for. They stood between us and the demons, countering the lightning and flame of the demons with thunder and smoke of their own. They stayed with us and helped us rebuild our lives until the demons were completely driven from our lands. Now, when the sky flashes, we fear no more, because the answering call of the humans' weapons let us know that they are still watching over us, fighting off the star demons before they ever reach our grounds again. The light flashes, he called loudly. The thunder answers, the crowd responded. We are safe, Kaporpo quietly answered. We are safe, the group agreed. The teller closed his eyes and slumped back in his chair. Everyone waited patiently on the old father. Presently, he straightened and opened his eyes. So we are never again caught again, helpless and dying. We learned from the humans how to stand between. The best of us are offered the chance to be like humans and stand between the village and trouble. At the stark moon telling, I hear there is one who would place himself between. I would, Kaporpo. Godol's cousin, Gotak, stood up from his bench. His head feathers were stiff and proud with his emotion. Then come forth, son, the teller turned to Tokal, his daughter. Bring out the human helm. Tokal stood up and reverently unwrapped her family's most precious heirloom, the helmet of a human's armor, all white with a black visor. She ceremoniously walked forward and put it in her Kaporpo's hands. He stood up and raised the helmet high. There is a terrible magic in human helmets. When they are off, humans dance and sing and laugh like the merriest of us. However, when danger approaches, they put these on and transform into terrible warriors. He held out the helmet to the young Gotak. The humans took their magic with them, but it is said that putting this on, seeing the world through the eyes of such fearful warriors, has an effect on the wearer. Be sure. Gotak's eyes went red with nervousness. He wasn't doubtful before, but he also wasn't in the presence of such a powerful totem either. Reaching his decision, he took the helmet and slid it onto his head. Kaporpo thought Gotak certainly looked the part as he turned his head this way and that. The facets of the visor winking firelight over the crowd. The squad of humans stamped their feet, and the crowd of villagers roared their approval. Little Godel stood on the bench and yelled loudest of all. Kaporpo held his hands up to silence everyone. He reached up and pulled the helmet off. Kapopol thought that he could see a change in Gotak's eyes when they were revealed, like he saw the world in a new way. The same subtle change he had seen in all who had donned that helmet in the ceremony. Perhaps before I pass, I will be able to work up the courage to look through, he thought to himself. Aloud he said, "Go, young Gotak, prove yourself through the basic, and you will craft your own helmet as a private. Do as the humans do, and stand between." Gotak went and stood with his new brothers. Soon he would make his own armor in memory of what humans wore. He would have his own Zak skin helmet modeled after the totem, and he would paint his own face black like the visor. He would place himself between danger and his loved ones, just like a human. End of story. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.